This was a really difficult week in Israel, with multiple Israelis and foreign nationals killed in rocket attacks in the north, and many soldiers, and especially this week reservists, who fell in Gaza and in Lebanon. One of those killed by Hezbollah was Rabbi Avi Goldberg, who spent 3 years teaching here in Memphis before moving back to Israel a decade ago. Rabbi Goldberg was beloved by his students and, of course, by his 8 children. And I encourage you to read some of the many moving eulogies that have been penned in his honor, in his memory. But the message I want to share with you tonight is not his teaching, but his widow Rachel's. Knowing that many thousands of people, literally thousands, including members of Knesset and the Israeli cabinet, would be visiting her home for Shiva, she invited politicians to come, but only if they would come in pairs with members from the other side of the aisle. They were only welcome if they came arm in arm with their political enemies. Because Rabbi Avi dedicated his life to bridging gaps, to bringing people together for the betterment of their communities. And because his wife and their children wanted Rabbi Avi's life's work to continue, even now that he is gone. Dozens of politicians who came to pay their respects each came, 2 by 2, with their political foes, perhaps taking one small step closer to healing and uniting our fractured homeland. This week, in our Torah portion, Parshat Noach, we read the origin story for the fracturing and the disunity among people, the Tower of Babel story. In Babel, you probably remember, everyone spoke the same language, and they all worked together towards one goal, building a tower that would reach the heavens. Sounds pretty good, right? But after God comes down and sees the tower and their one singular tongue, God decides to disperse them all over the world and confound their speech so that the disparate groups could not talk to one another. Very strange story. Why? Why punish this society which seemed to be working together towards a common goal? And why was disunity seemingly the punishment or the remedy that God came up with? In the words of Rabbi Dov Lenzer, the head of the Open Orthodox Rabbinical School Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, he says, we often speak of achdut, of unity, and assume that it is an unqualified good. But is this actually the case? Certainly there is a danger when unity becomes uniformity, when dissenting voices are silenced and everyone's thoughts, their words, and their actions are molded by a groupthink mentality. Those who built the tower were not only of one tongue, they were also of devarim achadim, which may be translated as of one discourse or one consensus. To only have one discourse, to blindly commit to one ideology, he says, may create a strong, single-minded following, but it does so at the price of crushing the individual, silencing dissent, and perverting the pursuit of truth. He concludes, unity, which is uniformity, is not a good, but an evil. God's remedy to spread the people out enabled them to individuate and allowed their different and competing ideas to flourish. Though they seemed united, the people of Babel, in fact, just lived in an echo chamber where it seemed like everyone agreed, but where all dissenting voices and ideas were squelched out. And this final Shabbat before the United States elections feels for many of us like a scary and precarious moment. We are not only divided, but we find it difficult, if not impossible, to see the virtue in our political opponents. We find it equally hard to listen to or to take seriously their concerns or their ideas. Is our society today so different from that of Babel? When was the last time that we had a conversation with someone on the other side of the aisle, not accusing them of supporting the most radical and crazy views that their side supports or some on their side support, but instead seeking common ground on the issues we agree on? Too often, we spend our time thinking that everyone on the other side is a caricature of the loudest and craziest voices in their party, instead of having real conversations about what leads them to believe or to vote in the way that they do. Too often, like the residents of Babel, we only hear people we agree with telling us how bad the other side is. And no matter who holds the office of president for the next 4 years, there are still 330 million other people that we have to learn to live next to raise our children alongside. There are both Harris and Trump voters who take care of us when we are sick, who serve in our armed forces and protect us, and of course who come here to pray together in this house of worship. Like brave Rabbi Avi Goldberg and his wife Rachel, like they come to teach us, unless we find a way to come together, we are doomed to drift further and further apart. There's another interpretation of this story from Babel, a midrash from Pirkei to Rabbi Eliezer on why God was so aggrieved about this tower they were building. The midrash says that as the people worked on building this tower high in the sky, if a man fell and died, no attention was paid to him. But if a brick fell and shattered, they would sit and weep. They were more concerned about the success of their project than the sanctity of the human beings they lived alongside. In the words of Rabbi Andrew Jacobs, we learn from this that the unity of Babel was superficial. Digging a little deeper, it was not a place where folks really looked out for one another. A society that is focused on the power of bricks, not humanity, is not united at all. God sees this and puts an end to the superficial unity by creating diversity, a myriad of languages, homelands, and viewpoints. While some might see God's action as a punishment, the creation of diversity was a much-needed course correction for humanity. We know that human beings were created to be partners with God, working side by side to repair and build this world. Through the experience at Babel, God learns that conformity will not lead to a better world. It is by working with those who are different from us, finding ways to build consensus. This is how we repair and build this world. In this tense week, and unfortunately, perhaps in the many tense weeks ahead, may we learn to treasure the humanity of others more than just the success of our side. May we build bridges and not barriers between us, as our Israeli cousins have modeled so beautifully. And most of all, may our country continue to be blessed with God's most precious gift, the gift of shalom, the gift of peace. Because only by coming together and working together can we change the world. Ani ve'ata neshana et ha'olam. Kei nihi ratzon. May it be God's will.